And we're back here at the Toronto Real Estate Forum, day 2
of
TRAF, day 3 for Adam and I recording after the Global Property Market Forum. This is Aaron, that's Adam. This is the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I'd like to thank our sponsors of the speaker video series that we're recording in concert with Informa. Sponsors are CGI and Doused Vukovic. We've got a returning guest. I was kind of giggling to myself before we went live. We often encourage our listeners to go back and listen to the original, because often we'll spend more time on the background and the sort of the story of your company and that kind of thing. With Kathy Black, who's here, we recorded the last time with her in April of 2020, and I did go back and listen to it, and I honestly do it on your own peril, because there's some major post-traumatic stress disorder triggers as we talk through 6 weeks into the pandemic and what are we dealing with, and it was really the trenches back then, right? Like
the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, it was I think you could feel it. And we theorized: is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months? Like it was.
Oh, we got that wrong.
No, yeah, no, it was. It really was traumatic listening to it. So, not that I'm discouraging to go back, but just with warning, be careful. It may leave you scarred. Kathy, thanks for joining us again. It was a much better environment.
In person, yeah. Back then, you could not have paid me to be this close to you two, but it's quite nice to do it now. So.
So Kathy, I mean, maybe if they're not going to go back and listen, because I suspect many people will just not want those memories. Why don't we do a quick Coles Notes of your career and what's gotten you to today, head of development at Fiera Real Estate?
Sure, yeah. I've been doing this actually for the last 2 decades. And 25% of my career being at Fiera, so it's been really interesting. I started my career in managing funds and development in real estate on the ground up within the GTA and Toronto area. Through the years, working through project management, construction management, so really getting boots on the ground experience, just trying to understand development, how to take it through entitlements, construction to the end, and how a pro forma also affects the development. The investment management component is great, but I feel that in order to really truly understand and vet a project, you have to do it. And so I spent a long part of my career doing that. And then now I'm back to, the dark side, managing funds. So I have 4 funds in this series, raising for the 5th one, where we are investing in ground-up development across the country.
Maybe it's worth addressing. Last time we spoke, you were doing a fundraise then in a difficult environment. How did that end up?
So I think the last we spoke, 2020 was when we were very eager and excited to launch the fund. But obviously with the pandemic and not being able to have in-person conversations, it's a little bit harder. Real estate is very much a brick and mortar. You have to see, you have to touch it and really understand it. And then development being another layer of complication on top of that. So it took us a little bit longer, but I'm happy to report that in 2022, we did raise $231 million. And that fund has been fully invested in great projects, 12 projects across the country.
What do we do just quickly what the portfolio looks like? Asset classes, geographies, what's your strategy?
Yeah, so across Fiera Real Estate, we have in total across different strategies, 62 development projects. They span from retail, office, purpose-built rental, condominiums, through to industrial, both for rent and for sale product. Currently, we have actively in the development, closing the development funds, have just under 20 projects still active, going through different cycles, some through entitlements, some under construction, and some just stabilizing. I would say that over the last 24 months, the main focus, as you can imagine with the pandemic and what that did to the office space, our focus has been residential and industrial. So if for a split, about 75% res and 25% industrial. Retail is always part of our mixed use, just on the base or first and second floor. Office, it's an interesting conversation because instead of building office, we're knocking down office to build new res. And as some may know, within the city of Toronto, there has always been a office replacement policy. So any office that you knock down, there has to be a one-to-one replacement of that. So the conversation has pivoted. So instead of doing that office replacement, the city has been open to having conversations of converting that, even though approved, office density to purpose-built rental or some sort of res. Obviously, stipulations in place and how you can program it, what they would like to see coming out of that conversion. But it's a very positive conversation moving in the right direction, especially as we're moving into a time where I'm concerned even for my kids. They're not going to be able to afford to buy anything, and let alone, the generation right now. So rental has been a big focus. And so the city is also understanding that, trying to get us out of the housing crisis. Rental is the direction that most of us are taking. Not to mention, you can't sell a condo right now.
Yeah, on top of that. Yeah,
yes.
no, of course. How many units is that total?
So within the pipeline, we have well over, just within the one project, there's 750 units.
Okay.
Plus or minus, just working through some of the details. But across the country, there's a significant supply coming up within our portfolio. If I had to round up, it'd be about 2,000.
Great.
So you mentioned that you're knocking down office. I mean, we spent a lot of time in this podcast talking about the office to res conversion. Everybody's talking about it, but there's obviously, just challenges there. Did you model out the option of doing a conversion versus a knockdown, and what'd you find?
So that's very interesting conversation, and a lot of people ask me about this. So we have not looked at that in the Ontario, Quebec, or BC space. Where I have had that conversation is in Calgary. So on our debt platform, they're actually funding a couple of projects that are office conversions to res within the same building envelope. Where I see the challenge in that is when you are modeling and building an office, the reports, and even something as, down to the minutia of it, the site servicing, how often the water flow, how often you're even using water, the bathroom, flushing, all that is factored into the building. For office space, when you're building that, really you're assuming a 9 to 5 use. But for res, it can be 24 hours a day, right? Everyone has a different work cycle, working from home. There's a lot more of that. So the complication that I've had with looking at using just an existing office space and converting that, the floor plates are a little bit different. It's not going to be that efficient. So you are going to have some of the larger units. And if we're looking on a price per square foot for either rent or for sale, that could make it really unaffordable. And then even just for everyday use of the building itself, you might not have the sanitary lines, the storm lines, and everything that, you would need.
Yeah, you need a city that's willing to commit to adopting or
in Calgary though, are they doing
Calgary,
and they're giving you there's grants too, right? There's incentives, so that's why I think we're seeing a lot of that there.
And apparently superior floor plates that make more sense than the buildings that were built in other cities.
What's the land pipeline look like?
The land pipeline, there's lots of opportunities that I see in the pipeline. So I think I mentioned I'm raising for our next development fund right now. If I had $1 billion, I could spend $1 billion. The land pipeline is great, especially, not great in the sense that it's seemingly distressed land, but it's opportunities. So the way that I see it, the interest rate environment, everybody knows about it. It's very difficult to carry land for that long at those heightened interest rates. The city was still taking a little bit longer for the entitlement. So when you can't, and then also just back to the condominium, if you're building a condominium, you can't get financing until you get a minimum threshold for sale. So,
and there's no sales.
There's no sales, and I'm experiencing that firsthand. And through conversations with very experienced, Class A developers, everyone's having the same problem. And it's not a matter of their expertise; it's really a market.
We had one client, condo developer, launched just 3 months ago and sold 2 units. And I think they decided to pivot now to something else.
Which market was that?
Toronto.
Was Toronto? Wow.
Yeah, good. Not heart of Toronto, but like near us in Etobicoke.
Yeah, that's a lot of the conversations I'm having.
Are you having the similar? Like you said, you've had it firsthand. Have you launched, and what's the success look like?
We launched June of 23.
Where's the site?
It's in the fantastic neighborhood of Leaside. So
Fancy.
Leaside does not have a lot of condominiums. So you would imagine.
You think
that-
downsizers alone,
Yeah.
right?
And so great comment, because those were the only buyers.
And how many units was the project?
So it's across two
You're
buildings.
you're kind of shrugging like you don't really want to share the
I don't really want to
details.
share this now, but it's about 200 units across the two buildings, and I think we've moved 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, to be fair, is probably better than some are doing, because I think there's a lot of zeros. There's a lot of offers out there. So
Yeah. So on that note, what I'd like to say is on the 8 or 9 that we did sell, it is at the sales pricing that we had targeted.
right.
Having said that, it's end users, and there's not a lot of end users right now. So
Yeah.
it's really, we were benefiting from people who don't need a mortgage. They would sell their home in Leaside and then just downsize into the condo.
We're a little bit early. If you think about the demographics, I think we're just a little bit early where that becomes a real material impact. It would be my estimate. I'm just guessing.
If you were a 71-year-old Leasider, you would stay in your home.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking to think about the baby boomers and where they are in their age and stage. They're just not quite. I think their kids are not quite old enough yet for them to want to get rid of the house for the most part. That's my experience with my parents and my wife's parents and that family level. They're just not quite. There's not a mass exodus, right? Like I just don't see that happening.
Parents
yet.
are overhoused. Is that the
Well, absolutely they are. We're all of our parents are, right?
I'm
So-
already thinking this. My kids are just teens. So I'm already thinking I'm overhoused. I can sell this now and move back downtown. So interesting
Yeah.
enough to your comment about the end users, we had a couple walk in. One of the condo units was about 1,200 square feet. And the comment, and it was, a bit cheeky, but the comment was, my walk-in closet is bigger than this space.
Yeah.
Hard to
big
com-
units.
hard to compete.
It's funny. I have a colleague that him and his wife did it. Their kids are older, and so they thought, you know what, we're overhoused, and they were living in a big plot of land and a big house in Burlington, and so they downsized to a condo in Burlington, and he said it was like 1,400 square foot, 3-bedroom, like a big condo in downtown Burlington, overlooking the lake, and they lived there for 6 months and hated it and sold it and bought a house.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't get over the elevator and the lack of outdoor space, and they just said, nope, we can't do this.
Yeah, so that's why the other program that's been quite successful is exactly for that. So you're building smaller townhomes or smaller homes
Right.
in subdivisions that will also, meet that demand.
That demand. They want to be able to walk into their front door, not take an
Without-
elevator, take their
exactly.
dogs for a walk or whatever it may be, right? Like
Yeah,
it's-
without the elevators and all of that access. Where I would say that would pivot is for snowbirds. It would be great.
Right.
Because then you don't have to worry about any of the maintenance on the grounds. You're
Makes sense.
only here for 6 months. So
But
we
there's
do have
not.
a lot of
There's,
snowbirds.
I don't think there's tens of thousands of those people, right? Like
No,
there's not the
definitely not.
absorption. We're getting a little bit off topic, so let's keep going. So condos are off. Apartments. Where are you building apartments? Where are you seeing success? And maybe we could talk about some rents if you're happy with that.
Yeah, so for apartments, we are building a lot of it in BC, so both in Victoria and Vancouver. We have a lot of supply in Quebec as well, built great purpose-built rentals. We've been doing that for the last decade. So the first development fund for Fiera started back in 2014. So since that first fund series, we're moving on to our 5th. We've always had purpose-built rental. So, but the Quebec market is very different than the rest of Canada. They like to rent. It's a option. You can be 50 years old and rent, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a good job or you're not successful. It's a lifestyle choice. But where we're doing it right now is mostly in Vancouver. Although the land base and land cost is quite high, you are benefiting from the rents. So Vancouver, because there is no supply, you do get the higher rents. We're looking in Toronto. I would love to build purpose-built rental right here in our backyard.
Like you could buy a site in Toronto and make it work.
That's where it's difficult.
You're almost there. Yeah, that's like
We're almost there.
We asked about land when you're talking about condos, but are you finding land values getting to a point where
Land value right now on the few that I've seen, it is at a discount. And that's because, like I mentioned at the outset, a little bit of distrust, just people not being able to carry it. Having said that, where we can get a lot more success is with the policies that are coming down, some of the incentives and the grants and exemptions. So City of Toronto and even the province of Ontario, they're working towards that. Conversations about development charges being waived, property taxes being frozen for X amount of time, depending on if you're putting in below market rent. And then even for green space, park levies, quite a few things and incentives that they're trying to roll out to make the performance work so that we can build even here in Toronto. And Toronto hasn't seen significant purpose-built rental constructions since the 1970s and 80s, right? But it is coming out a lot more now. I have two that are condos within our portfolio, and I'm just currently, the team is underwriting it to see if it can work as a purpose-built rental project.
Which is challenging if you bought the land on condo value.
Condo pricing.
Yeah.
But with the incentives, and then, we all know about CMHC and their various financing options, if we can make that work. So really, it's a collaboration between everyone. It's the city, it's the lenders, it's the developers. If we can all work together, it can be possible.
Yeah.
What rents are you using? Is the other part of the pro forma that can work or not work, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why we've been so successful in BC. In a couple of years ago, they had the Broadway corridor plan. So it's a very specific neighborhood. At the time of underwriting then, I was using about fours. Right now, everything that I'm seeing, it's already escalated year over year. And you can comfortably carry just under $6.
Wow.
In Toronto, I am not getting those numbers. And Toronto being the mega city that it is, it's surprising. But we are, mid fours. And then, of course, depending on the neighborhood, depending on the demographic and who you're renting to, it just goes up or down from there.
There is rent softening in Toronto.
Yeah.
Like it's down. And that's just affordability.
Yes.
Like not rent affordability, like income affordability.
I mean, but was the intention is you wanted to see rents soften? That is the definition of affordability. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny you made the comment about Vancouver. Like income in Vancouver is higher. We find that on the ground, like when we're hiring, analysts to underwrite.
Right.
There's a premium for a Vancouver analyst.
It's funny because the constant joke is we're building for people who are living paycheck to paycheck though in Vancouver because they're living there for the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, doctors that are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. You mentioned some distressed land, and we're hearing more and more still. Even though as interest rates are coming down, do you get approached, or have you thought about or engaged in sort of partnering to kind of get in there and rather than buying the land at distress, and there's a brand saving. I believe anyway, we have some partners, or there are some developers that don't want to be seen as obviously being put into receivership, and so they're looking for partners to come in and kind of salvage the deal. Are you being approached for doing that? Have you don't have to name names, of course, but
Well, if
just
you do, it'd be better. But yeah.
is that an opportunity there to kind of step in and sort of be useful because you have the capital available?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And as you may know, most of our development projects across the country, we do partner. It's always on an GPLP basis. Anywhere between 50 to 80% is our share of the equity. It's all pari passu in terms of covenant, equity, injection, all of that. So yes, I've had these conversations multiple times a day with developers coming in. So where, just from our previous comment, where there's a bit of a disconnect is if you're trying to keep the land value at what you bought it at, and especially if you bought it at the height of the market, the numbers just don't work. So if you're open and willing to have conversations about adjusting some of that stack, what those numbers look like, then it's a very viable and, obviously.
It's almost
something
like,
that we can talk
listen,
about.
you're going to take a loss. You can either take a loss the ugly way with receiverships
Publicly.
and publicly, or you can take a loss quietly, and I'll step in and help you.
I just had
salvage it.
that exact conversation this morning in my meeting just before we're coming over here. So, yeah.
Either you make an announcement about our happy partnership, or
or you
Your
wait
lender
for
will make an
you wait
announcement.
for stories to put the article out there, right? Yeah.
In you were running through your asset classes. Did you mention retail?
Retail is only in the ground floor of our mixed-use buildings. We're not doing standalone retail. We do have retail plazas, not within the development funds, but within our core strategy. So where we're seeing some value in that. We love our.
What are your thoughts on retail right now?
Love existing retail, but you wouldn't build it, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't build a standalone mall. That's for sure. But when I like retail to service our res, and it is needed, right? You have built-in customers. It's especially if it's grocery anchored. We do have really good tenants within the retail portfolio that we have that's existing. So that's, a program that we would like to replicate. But again, it would be part of our mixed use program.
When it's condo, do you sell that off?
We do.
You don't hold on to it.
We don't hold on to it. So it could be stratified so that can be sold off to a commercial user.
Why do you do that rather than pivot it into a different fund?
There is the option to do that, but really having those conversations to just sell a retail component, the ground floor or ground and second of a condo tower is sometimes more difficult. For the closed-ended funds, I like the liquidity. So I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. And we've always had success in selling retail space and condominiums. There are small to mid-sized business owners that would like to be, in charge of their own destiny, not just subjected to what the landlords want in rent. And so if I'm going to pivot just with that same conversation about retail, that's exactly why our industrial condo projects are as successful as they are. So instead of being, because the lease is now, I don't know if any of your previous guests have talked about it recently, but even on the Big Bay, you're just sub $20. This is not with annual escalations. So we have, smaller business owners who don't want to be subjected to this because with the small bay product, you're mid to high 20s. So instead, they'd like to buy this and then just be able to use it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned the success you were having with that product on the previous episode. So maybe just talk through what the economics look like. So you're buying, obviously, the employment land. And when you spec it out for a big bay or a large sort of standard industrial space versus the condo, where do the yields, how big is the difference in the yields?
Well, it's interesting because on the condo play, you are really building between 100 to 150,000 square feet. Although I do have one now that's north of 350. So it's my largest industrial
And
condo.
what size are the units?
So on the smaller 100 and 150, we have units in between 2,500 to 5,000. Some of the larger ones that we're doing now, it's up to 20 to 25,000, even 30,000. There are users who buy multiple units and combine it together.
And does it end up being like quasi retail space?
Somewhat depends on
So
the
you need
zoning.
you need to then be careful about your positioning, the parking, because I'm sure there's consumers going, like, it's a little bit of a different
Road
It
facing
is.
units would matter.
yeah,
more.
it's a different design. They want signage probably over their units. Like it's a little bit different than just a big industrial box.
It is, and the small condos are actually, they look very nice. We designed it so that they look like office space and retail. So on the retail use, interesting enough, not all employment use and industrial sites will allow for retail use. So it is a specific zoning, but one that we're doing right now up in Brampton.
How do you deal with clear heights? Because I'm sure some users want 30 feet and some users want 10 feet.
Yeah, so for us, we want to future-proof all of our products. And when we're doing Big Bay, we're actually going up to 40 feet right now. The interesting conversation is sprinkler systems. So when you go to 30, from 36 to 40, there's a premium just for that fireproofing. But when we're building smaller bay, they don't have the same requirements for stacking. So we are typically between 24 to 28 to 20, but the average is about 26.
So in contrast to your residential condo sales, which obviously are a struggle, when you bring industrial condos to market, how robust is the sales activity, the tours, the offers?
This is my favorite topic because industrial isn't sexy, but to me it's the best and sexiest asset class. So I think in our last podcast, I did mention that we were yielding, significantly higher at a completion for industrial condos. So that continues to be true. My last project, we hit a just under 70% IRR on that. At the time of underwriting, we're always very conservative with underwriting. I'm getting maybe about 120 over my pro forma underwriting numbers per square foot. So people are spending millions of dollars on these units. It's a home run. And that's why it's a program that we do a lot. I have a partner that we're on our 10th project and looking to do more.
So they're not valuing it on a cap rate.
They're not, because it's a for sale product. So similar to condos, there's no cap rate. It's just what the market will bear for sale. But because it's so limited in supply, if it's gone, it's gone.
How difficult is it to get industrial land in the GTA right now?
It is difficult for certain, for the smaller bay. So the last two projects that we did have, we bought a larger land piece, severed it. So the smaller, 8 to 12 acres for the condominium play, and the balance of it for our big bay. Well, big bay anywhere between 80 to 300,000 square feet. It varies depending on the land, but to find just standalone 10 to 12 acres is a little bit more difficult. But that's why my latest project is 350,000 square feet of industrial condos.
You should go to financing.
Let's talk about financing. I assume you're not using land financing, which makes land more digestible.
No, we do put a bit of land acquisition financing on it, and you get, 60 to 65% LTV on it. It's not, it's still, the options are still there. So I think it's really it's not going to be new, but the last couple of years, it's all relationship-based lending, right? So if you have those strong lender relationships, they're willing to have the conversation. You're a good borrower. We're always paying back.
Yeah, it helps that you have a multi-billion-dollar funds, and
we love borrowers that pay us back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the one comment that I had from one of our lenders is, "You're paying us back too quickly. I just want to know that you can pay us back, but can you just hold the money for a little bit longer?"
See-through apartments, industrial condo or industrial. Where are you financing that, or what's the financing look like for that?
Yeah, so for the industrial condos, the financing is similar, almost to a res condo.
Right.
We've benefited from not having to have any pre-sales though, because it is still building on spec, and it's very similar to a residential condominium in terms of what you can get for leverage.
That's interesting. And then look at liquidation levels.
Yeah, and then you also benefit when it is a condominium to use some of the purchase deposits too. So that does make up part of the equity stack.
So for 2025, can I guess then that your focus will continue to be industrial and apartments?
It will be. So I'm going to say, once the new fund launches and any other mandates that we get, the focus will be probably 75% res and still 25% in industrial space across the country. Historically, we've done a lot of investments in Ontario and Quebec, right? And that's where 70% of the GDP and population is, but we have expanded out into BC and Alberta. So the programming for 2025 will be the same across those four. Yeah.
It's been successful, so why change it?
Yeah,
Is that the logic?
But also even in Atlantic Canada, because some of the metrics that we're seeing there just for rental is very interesting. So
there's a building boom going on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
So look a little bit farther forward, 26, 27, 28. Are you going to have more or less active construction sites going than you have right now?
I will say we will have more, because a lot of the projects that we're going through entitlements right now, there are primes for a groundbreaking in construction in 25, 26. As I start up this new fund, the new projects will be in the entitlement phase, and then just a continuation beyond 26, 27. It's going to, that cycle of assets will be breaking ground.
And I guess the last question, just around that fund, capital raising, what's the appetite been like? Like, is there still strong appetite? I mean, I think you guys are a little bit unique because you've got this, the 30-year experience and execution and the history of the funds. But have you had any change in the tone as you've had those conversations to raise capital?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the same story for everybody. Any capital raising has been very challenging and has been difficult. There has been interest, but the conversation takes a lot longer. But in the last 2 months, there's been a peak of interest from, multiple groups. So not just private wealth or family offices, but from some institutions and even, groups that wouldn't typically invest money into developments. There's been ongoing conversations there too. So I'm very hopeful that by the end of Q1, early Q2, we would be in a good position to deploy capital and start investing.
Kathy, thank you so much. I don't know if the listeners can hear it or not, but Kathy's voice is a little strange from travel and work, and so we thank her for showing up today.
She's partying too hard.
And this is the only year that I didn't. So
yeah, I can come home at 3 a.m. We want to thank, of course, Dal Vukovic and CGI to be sponsors of this speaker video series. First National for powering the podcast. The Canadian Real Estate Forum for hosting us here in Toronto. But again, most of all, Kathy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me again.